My name is Noelle Manzo-Pietrefesa, and I am interviewing Mr. Tim Walker on Wednesday, April 5th, 2017. Hello, Mr. Walker, and thank you so much for taking your time out of your day and agreeing to speak with me today. How did you come to live in our community?
Well, I was born in Fly Creek, New York on November 21st, 1960. Seems like a long time ago, isn't it? I went to Cooperstown Central School. I was born at Bassett Hospital back when Bassett Hospital was just a stone building. And the maternity ward was actually on the second floor back then. And that's how I came to Cooperstown.
Were you born here, or did you move here from another place?
Oh, I was born here.
Oh, I think you answered that in the last question.
That's okay, yes.
Can you tell me what life was like for you growing up, including school and things you enjoyed doing?
Being someone that's been around the world, I can tell you that I've always told people, good friends from other places, that I was one of the luckiest people ever. For growing up, I had a loving family, a grandfather who had a place on the lake at 6 Mile, where my mom, of course, grew up. And I had a family and a school. At the time, I didn't think so, but I had people that were looking at for my best interest. And it was just a small community, very different than now. And maybe we'll get into that, but yeah.
It's very interesting. Were there any teachers at Cooperstown Central School that you went to school with?
Any teachers at Cooperstown? Oh, that are here now? No. Let me think. Teacher-wise, well, actually, down into high school, not really a teacher. Jeanette Lyons, she works in the guidance office. I went to school with her. I have to think back. Her husband, Dave Lyons, he's in maintenance at the school. And those are about it at the time I was going to school.
May I ask about your family, both the one you grew up with and your own children?
Oh, sure. Yes. I love talking about my family.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Growing up, my family, I had a dad who was a World War II veteran. I was a baby boomer, but I was on the tail end of the baby boomers. I was one of the last baby boomers. My dad was worked for the Otsego County Highway Department. My mom went to Oneonta Teachers College. Before it was called Suco, it was called Oneonta Teachers College. And she became a 6th grade teacher. And she taught in Richfield for a little bit. And then she quit teaching to take care of her family. My mom was the greatest person on earth. She loved teaching, and she gave it up just for her family, and she didn't really want to do it. That was a big discussion in the family. But she did, and that's how much she loved her kids. So that's why I'm lucky. I had a great mom. My dad was great, too. I had one brother who passed away when I was 14. I have 2 other brothers and a sister. And they all now live in the area. We all went away and did what we had to do and came back. My family, I have 2 sons. I have Bob and Tim. And boy, am I lucky. The greatest kids. And they're just, we have our times, but they're just great kids. And and of course, I love my kids very much. As my whole, the rest of my family. My grandfather was a Otsego County clerk from 1938 until the 1950s, my mom's dad, and he was a big part of my life. He came to pick me up every weekend on Saturday, and he would bring me into town, Cooperstown. And we would walk up and down Main Street, because back then, people talked to each other. And it took an hour and a half for my grandfather to walk from the county building down to the post office or the Baseball Hall of Fame, because he would stop and talk an hour. He'd talk a while with people. And nobody else wanted to go with them because they're like, oh gosh, no, But I loved it because, you know what, I listened. And the people he talked to were very interesting older people. And I would look forward when I look out the window and see him pulling into the driveway. And I was really waiting for my grandfather to come along. And that lasted for a while. So, yeah.
Well, that's a great story.
Yeah.
I just asked a question. How has our community changed in the time since you have been here?
Oh.
For instance, what did Main Street look like?
Oh, gosh. If I tell you, you're going to be envious. Main Street, back in the late 60s, early 70s, the parades were big. July 4th, they had a humongous carnival down at the lakefront with the Ferris wheel, and they had the carnivals where you flip the coins and get the glass. I was actually pretty good at that, but my mom would get angry with me because I had a stack of dishes that I'd bring home. And everybody, they had bands play out into the night. You would walk up to Main Street on a Friday afternoon, and all the kids, you couldn't drive down Main Street because kids were playing Frisbee down the middle of Main Street, and it was packed. Oh, yes, packed with kids. Everybody watched out for everybody, so it wasn't, and it was just like everybody was free. And we'd all meet. We were running out of here, and we'd all meet down on Main Street, and we'd spend, and our parents would come and pick us up. They'd give us an hour or two down on Main Street. And like I said, we were throwing Frisbees down the middle of Main Street, and it was just wall-to-wall children back then. The stores, we had a Clark's Men's store. We had a couple hardware stores. Commerce was pretty established in Cooperstown. It was just, and we had Smalley's Theater, where I watched Star Wars. Actually, a friend of mine who is with the Baseball Hall of Fame now, his dad took a picture, and it's a line of us waiting to get into Smalley's to watch Star Wars. But it was just, I miss it because I have two kids, and I'd wish that they could have just done that, And I feel they're missing out. But anyway, that's neither here or there.
It's very funny and interesting information.
Oh, the lake, too. So we swam a lot.
How do you feel about those changes?
How do I feel? It's depressing. It is, because who doesn't like to watch children playing? As I get older, I don't know if it's just me or if I just get more, because, older people like to watch things too. Now when I step out and my kids and we look down Main Street, there's no one there, and if they are there, they're staring at their phones. And they're just not doing anything. They're walking, their surroundings, It makes me want to grab a Frisbee and just throw it up Main Street. They go, hey. But I'd probably get in trouble for that now. But I don't, in the lake, I was, I give tours at Hyde Hall on the other end of the lake up in Glimmerglass State Park.
Oh, really?
And yes, and this couple summers ago, me and this lady who was my age was standing on the lawn looking out over the lake, and she had been here in the 1970s. And she lived in a camp across the lake. And she turns to me, she goes, do you notice anything different? And this was the middle of July. And I said, yes. I said, I'm glad you brought that up. I said, do you see anybody water skiing on the lake? No, there weren't any boats. And back when I was a kid, people were fishing, water skiing, and just having a blast on the lake in the summer. So, yeah.
What is your favorite memory of your life in this community?
I have two memories that go way back, and I only have the two. The one is sitting on my grandfather's lap at 6 Mile on the dock, and it was in the summertime. And I'll never forget, for some reason it sticks in my head. I don't know why, I should forget it because I was only maybe 7 years old. And I remember sitting on his lap, and we were looking out from 6 Mile across the lake. And we were looking across there, and he whispered in my ear. He said, look over there. He said, when you come by next summer, it's going to be totally different. And I'm like, well, I wonder, what do you mean? Like, and he didn't tell me why. But the next summer I came up to the lake, and all the trees that were along the shoreline of the lake had disappeared. And they were putting in the beach to Glimmerglass State Park. And for some reason, that just sticks in my head. It's a good memory of my grandfather. Because my grandfather, he was traditional. And he just made sure that he thought enough of me to make sure that I looked across the lake and noticed those tree lines, because I wouldn't see it again, ever. So that's one memory. Another memory was us running down to the living room at 6 Mile, again, at the house, and a small black and white TV set. And I sat there right in front of this TV set. We all sat there, and Neil Armstrong was getting ready to step on the moon. And before that had happened, you could go by, like, to the gas station that gave things out when you got gas. And the big thing was Apollo 11 and the moon lunar module that landed on. And of course, my dad had to stop and get gas so I could get this, and you put it together. Well, anyway, we're sitting there in the morning, and here we're watching this guy step down off this ladder, and he steps onto the face of the moon. And we're all like, wow. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was like, wow, that's a big thing. And that always stuck in my mind, because I can even tell you, it was a sunny day, and you can hear the lake waves crashing on the beach of the lake, and because our window where the TV was at was by the porch, and the porch was out over the lake. And I just remember just the day and how great it was, and sunny and bright, and hear this guy stepping on the moon, the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong. And I'll never forget that.
Wow, I couldn't imagine watching somebody step on the moon.
Yeah, it's kind of neat.
I understand your grandfather lived on or near Otsego Lake. What can you tell me about your adventures on the lake?
Oh, many. Fishing. My dad and his friends would come over, and what that was called trolling on the lake, and going up to the Thayer's boat launch, which is now the Biological Field Center. Willie Thayer and his 2 hound dogs. And we'd get gas in the boat, and Willie, we had to go find him, and his dogs were always sitting on the dock, and doing that. What else? Water skiing, boarding on the lake. And I have to tell you this. I learned this later. Otsego means meeting place, but what's kind of fascinating about that in Mohegan language, from way back. What's interesting about that is that in the 70s, it was also a meeting place. I met my first girlfriend on the lake in the summertime, and I met all these friends that weren't from Cooperstown, but they would come up for the summer. And just the time we'd have on the lake. I was into rock and roll and playing bass guitar. We had our small little band, and we'd set up outside my grandfather's house. We'd start playing, and all our friends would come out from everywhere and listen to us play. We had boats that would pull up, and we just had, getting together with all my friends and such. And we were lucky, to have that.
Yeah. Good adventures.
Oh, yes.
Do you know any legends or stories related to the lake or our community?
Legends or stories. The story that fascinates me, the Coopers had a servant. I think his name was Joe Tom. I'm trying to remember correctly. I hope I have that name right. But anyway, the reason that this legend fascinates me is because if you've ever been on the lake, you could sit on the shore of the lake, and someone could be in a boat way up the lake or way across the lake, and if they were talking to you like this on the boat, you could hear it on the shore of the lake. So we could sit there and listen to other people's conversations as they're driving up the lake. Well, the legend goes that the Coopers had a servant, and what he would do is he'd take guests out, or the Coopers out on the lake, and there's a part of the lake where if you yell, it echoes, and it echoes all the way up the lake. And he used to had a big voice, and he used to. They used to get fascinated by this echo that would go up the lake, and he would yell, and it would echo up the lake. There's that. Of course, Kingfisher Tower. As far as legends, that would be about the one that yes, one of the legends. I was always fascinated with Sunken Island. I always asked, my grandmother was also a teacher, a 6th grade teacher, and she started out in a one-room schoolhouse, by the way, in Bowerstown. She taught all the grades in a schoolhouse. And I always would ask her about Sunken Island because I was fascinated. Here's a lake, and you couldn't see the island, but it's out there. And if you drove over it with a boat, you could see the rocks and such. And I was always, my imagination would go crazy about this hermit living on this island out in the middle of the lake. And I was curious about Sunken Island. And of course, it's the legend of Cooper and Hunter's Cabin and such. And it's in Cooper's novels. And yeah, so that's another legend.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy nature? If so, why?
Oh, yes. And you hit... Another thing I used to love do is I would disappear, but I tell my mom. And I used to go for walks in the woods. And what I would do is I would go for a walk in the woods, and I would sit up in the woods all afternoon. And what I would do is I'd sit under a tree, or I'd find a nice place to sit. And I would sit back from the tree, and I would close my eyes. And what I would do is I hope this doesn't sound strange, but I would close my eyes and I'd listen to sounds, and I'd listen to them for like an hour. It was a way for me to rest, to get rid of the stress. But in another way, it was like me learning about the woods. I'd walk, and I'd just sit. And I'd close my eyes, and I'd listen to birds, and I'd listen to different sounds, a plane flying over. I'd hear cars off in a distance. And in my mind, and I would just listen to all these sounds. And that fascinated. The wind going through the pine trees. And I just listened. And I spent a while doing that. And it was for me to get away from everybody. And it was just so relaxing. And that's something maybe I should go for another walk in the woods sometime and do that. But that was my yes. That was my that was the way I would get with nature and such, and of course the views that you would see, and yeah.
Very interesting. Maybe I'll try it sometime.
Yes. Oh yes.
Guaranteed. Have you ever worked in our community, and if so, where?
Yes. Museums. I worked at Farmers Museum, the Fenimore Art Museum, Hyde Hall. After high school, when I joined the military in the Marine Corps, I had a really good friend. His name was Dave Urbanski. He was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, but he had gone to college and he'd done an internship at the Smithsonian Institute. And for some reason, he just grabbed a hold of me, like he was my mentor in the Marine Corps. And I don't know if he saw that I really loved history or not, but he got me really involved in history. At that time, Civil War, that's where my Civil War reenacting comes from, and such. And that's where my love. And you do your career. I was in aviation. I concentrated on that. And then afterwards, when you have time to do things that you want to do, I just said, you know what? I really like doing this. I want to do it. So I go up to the museums, and I work at the museums and at Hyde Hall, and I read. And I have to tell myself, you know what? If you're going to read something, you need to get away from the history books for a little bit and start reading another book, because I have a tendency just to focus on one thing, and it takes me telling myself to get away from it, to read something that isn't related to history. But so that's why I work at those places. And it's a school, of course. And I'll tell you what, this elementary school smells the same it did back in the 1960s. As a matter of fact, Miss Pestar, when she was a secretary down here, by the way, I went to school with her too. That was another person. When I walked in, my first day, sign up the sub, and she, hey, Tim, and I was like, and she goes, yes, it smells the same, doesn't it? Yes. And it's amazing when you come back to something after so many years and things that come back and the smells of the elementary school. And of course, I love the kids. And that's the important thing. So I'm doing what I like to do now. Aviation, I love that. But I also had to do that. And now I've gotten into the mindset as I've gotten older, you know what? I'm going to do what I want to do and love to do when I want to do it. And kind of, because I retired from the military. So, and yes, that's what I'm doing. Like growing a beard, Yeah. So, yes.
I love how you have a great big explanation for every question I ask you.
Oh, this is, yeah. Well, I love to talk, and that's, that's my family. My grandfather was the same way.
Are you involved with any organizations besides your work here in our community, and can you tell me a little bit about them?
Yes. When I first retired from the military, I was very involved in Veterans Affairs. I was post commander of the VFW in Cooperstown. They thought I had potential, and I became the what they call county council. I was in charge of the veterans in Otsego and Delaware County. I was commander of that. And I went into district, New York State, Veterans Affairs. Back then, what we were trying to do, and I'm pretty proud of this, veterans, if you lived in Cooperstown, you were a veteran, you had to drive all the way to Albany to get veterans care. So at that time, Seward, but it was federal. We had to go federal too. We testified in government in front of like a Congress, the government. We had to give testimony, and what we were trying to do is get satellite veterans clinics, so somebody from Cooperstown didn't have to drive to Albany 70. When you're old and you're 72, you want to drive 72 miles to have, if you have something that can be taken care of. And that's what they had to do. And that's why the veterans buses and stuff like that. But we wanted to get it so they could convenience. And I'll be darned if they didn't pick up on that. And now that's where these veterans satellite clinics started popping up. So we were part of that. That was one of the things. That, Veterans Affairs, also volunteering. If somebody needs something, help with something, volunteering. I'm with the 125th New York State Volunteer Association, and it's an association I volunteer for to promote this regiment that fought in the Civil War from this area, and to help out descendants find who their history of the descendants, help them find history, research, a lot of research with that, and of course reenacting and teaching history to people all over. Fun.
Love your information.
Yeah.
What have you and your family done for entertainment in our community that you enjoy the most?
I wish Smalley's Theater was open. Entertainment. Movies. Movies seems to be a big thing. I've grabbed the kids. I like spontaneous. I'll grab the kids and say, you know what? Get in the car, and we'll take off. And we'll take off for a couple of days. And I just head. Wherever we end up, that's where we'll stay the night. And we've run across amusement parks out in the middle of nowhere. I took them and we went south into Pennsylvania, and there was an amusement park, like a Six Flags, that I never even knew was there. And here we're driving in this rural area, and we look over, and here's this big amusement park. It's like, oh, that's cool. So we spent the night in this place, and we went to the amusement park. My dad used to love doing that. He would get us all in the car, and we'd drive north into the Adirondacks, or go, and back then that was a big thing, the amusements, the North Pole amusement areas. And so, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I was like thinking.
Mm-hmm. Oh, fishing too. Other things, yeah.
I understand you were in the military. Can you talk a little about your time in the military?
Sure. I joined April 28th, 1980. I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. I went to Parris Islands, South Carolina for boot camp. Made it through there. I went into aviation. My dad, being a World War II veteran, of course, he was a veteran of Guadalcanal and the Pacific Islands of World War II. He made me promise that I would go to school while I was in the military. He didn't want me to end up in a foxhole somewhere. So aviation was big. I loved planes and model planes, and I used to stand and at night watch the planes go over the lights and stuff. And so I went into aviation, and I went to aircrew school, and I flew. My first unit was H-46 helicopter search and rescue. We would go after downed pilots and do rescues. We had a registered nurse, a rescue swimmer, sometimes a flight surgeon, depending how bad the rescue was. And I did that. I also flew VIP planes. At the time, the Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, I flew on his plane. We flew VIPs. And then I went into E-2C Hawkeyes, which is an early warning aircraft with radar. And then I ended up with C-130s. And I ended up down in the South Pole and in the Arctic Circle. And people ask me, I would probably say, and they think I'm crazy, and I say, you know what, my most fascinating time in the military was in the South Pole, believe it or not, because we did work with the National Science Foundation, and it's not every place where you can sit beside a world-renowned scientist, a weather scientist, I'll never forget this, and you can talk to him while he's looking at data on his laptop, and they were really nice, and he loved, because that helped him out too, and he would tell me what he's looking at and the data and what they're trying to prove or disprove, and it was just fascinating people. And I got to stay in New Zealand for a couple weeks on the way down and a couple weeks on the way back, and that was nice. Yeah. So, and I lived in the Mediterranean. I lived in Sicily for 4 years, Spain, Israel. That was fascinating on a history aspect because I stayed in Tel Aviv, and I got to go check out Jerusalem. And I lucked into that. I seem to luck into things. They were doing a dig in Israel, and our guide brought us to the dig, which they don't take everybody to a dig, and we got to talk to the people that were doing the dig and what they were looking for, and a lot of history in Jerusalem, of course. And I learned something in the military. I learned that every day, I had great people. I learned that every day is a learning experience, and I still do that, even though I'm 56 years old. When I wake up in the morning, and I like to read, but I try to find out something new. It's like a quest. It's like this big quest, a quest. And I try to find something, learn something new every day. And that's what I learned from the military. I went to so many schools in the military. I have a stack full of diplomas. But that's what I did. Whenever they had a school open up, I'll go. Because, believe it or not, science counts. In careers, I never thought I'd use science. And believe I did use science. And and some math and such. And I had to relearn things, but you know what? That's part of life. I didn't know, especially math. I was weak in math. And that's another thing. And sometimes on the job, I had to learn some trigonometry and slide rules and the whole 9 yards and figure out things. And luckily I had people that were patient, and they said, let me show you how to do that. And they would sit and spend extra time, and they would show me how, and that's how I learned. That's where I learned quickly, pick things up, and pay attention, focus, and that's my benefit from the military.
Yeah, and you're right. Every day is a learning experience.
Yeah, you pick things up.
Life's
From your friends. I think it's great because there's people that can't do that anymore, and that's why I think it's a great thing.
I also know that you love history and have a special interest in the Civil War. Could you tell me about that?
Yes. I think it was my 14th birthday. My mom gave me a book for my birthday. And honestly, at 14, I wasn't really an avid reader. I'd rather go outside and play kickball. But she gave me a book, and it was called Killer Angels. And it was written by a gentleman named Mike Shera. I met his son later on. And it was about the Battle of Gettysburg. And I started on page 1, and you know what? I couldn't put the book down. It was a funny thing. I put it down, and then I go walk away to do something. I'm like, and I go right back, and I pick it right back up, and I just started reading this book, and it was like, wow, this is cool. And then something else I did. And this is a habit I picked up from my grandfather. When he would pick me up in the summertime, and I'd go up on Saturdays, I would get bored. And he would be up on his typewriter. He had a Remington typewriter, and he would type. He was a clerk and did law stuff. And he had a nice local history, him and my grandmother, members of Nisha, they had a local history library. And I would get into that because I was bored, and I'm like, what can I do? So I go up and bother my grandfather, and he didn't want me to bother him because he's typing out papers. So he goes, get away from here. So I grab a book. And I would start reading about these people, and I start researching these people. He left a deed one time for me on the desk, an old deed, and I was researching the names and stuff. Well, anyway, in the Civil War. So I read this Civil War book, and I said, I want to find out more. And my mom started buying me books, and I started reading all these books. And then I ran into Dave from the Marine Corps, and it's something that I enjoy doing. I've been known to stay up with a candle lit at night, and if I have a question about somebody, I'll keep searching until I find out. I don't know, maybe a little OCD there. But I'll keep searching until I find out what my question is about that person. I've been known to stay up at night and I know I saw it somewhere, and just keep searching for answers. I don't know, just part of my personality, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes when I have a question and it doesn't get answered online, I just keep rewording it or something and try to find my way into that question.
And you find out, okay, if I didn't find it here, maybe I'll find it there. And you find the little spots, which is great because there are people that are looking for the same answers, and you run into them looking for your answers. And you can look kind of, they'll be like, well, I can't find the answer to this. And you go, oh, I know where I saw that. And you take them to that, and they're like, oh, well, thanks. You just saved them a bunch of time. And you learn to work together with people like that. Yeah. And that's fun.
As we are coming to the end of our time together, I have just 2 more questions. What words of wisdom or advice would you give to the young people growing up in our community today?
Well, now that I have kids that are older, that are teenagers, and I've thought about this, you're going to have problems. You're going to have big problems, and there's always a solution. As long as you don't, there's always a way out. Don't ever think there's not a way out of a solution. There's always a way out of a solution. And it might not be the way that you might want. And I've been there. I've been there where I've had problems where, I would rather not deal with that, because that meant I had to go this way. And to be honest with you, it was embarrassing to go that way. And I really didn't want to be embarrassed. But you know what? I had to go that way. So that was one. You're going to have to go places you don't want to go. But that's the only way you're going to fix your problem, okay? That's one thing. Another one is, like I said before, attitude, believe it or not, has a big, big part. And it took me a while to learn this. Do what you love. But you're going to have to, you have to, like, every day, I know sometimes it's hard for everybody to get up every day. But you have to try to, and when you get up, get away from that bad attitude. Go, you know what? I'm going to learn something today. That's, and it can go bad, but you know what? I started the day off great, and you always have that, right? And that's why I try to teach my kids, especially with the people, kids. My kids are going out in the world now. It's like, you know what? Things are going to happen, and you're just going to have to make sure that you go the way you don't want to go. That's it.
I'm going to have to quote you on all of that. Is there anything else that you would like us to know about your life in this community? It's a great community, and I hope, and you'll see. And you don't say, things you don't think you're going to do now. You probably will do. You might go out in the world, and you might go to other cultures, and you always come back and think, especially when you're overseas, you always come back and think about Cooperstown and think about the lake and how important the lake was in my life, the people in Cooperstown, and that keeps me going in tough spots and wherever you are in another culture. But you learn about the other cultures, and and you see how fortunate you are here. Yeah. Amazing information.
Well, I'm glad I could help.
Thank you so much for your service and meeting with me today. Your answers are so interesting, and many people will enjoy hearing about you and your life here in Cooperstown.
Well, thank you.